G'day, this is Troy from Dashcam Owners Australia bringing you another dashcam review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Street Guardian SGZC12RC. The RC designates that this is the remote camera, so it's a very sleek option if you're after an item that isn't easily spotted inside your car. There is also an optional external waterproof lens that could be useful for four-wheel drive or motorbike applications. Now, as usual, we'll start by taking a look at what comes in the box with this camera. Starting from the top left and moving across, we have the carrying pouch, our assorted cables, so we have our charger, the camera lens cable, the PC cable. Then top right we have the internal lens. Just below that we have the actual unit itself. Below that there is the non-slip mount. Moving back to the left we have our memory card reader, and an assortment of stickers and window cleaners. And now we'll move on to having a look at the actual unit itself as well as the lenses, but we'll start with the unit. Here's the actual screen on the unit. I'll run through the menus later on in this review. On our left hand side we have our connections for the front camera, our USB connection to the computer, and our power socket. On the other side is our memory card. Very simple on the base unit of this. Now we'll take a look at the interior lens. As you can see here, very small and subtle. Mounted on your windscreen, it would be very hard pressed for anyone to notice this lens. Now I'll quickly show you the exterior lens. I'll just note as well that both these lenses, despite being different designs, are identical in their quality. They are both the same componentry inside. And for the purpose of my review, I've actually used the external lens just for something a bit different. I mounted it on the bull bar of my four-wheel drive, just for a bit of a different perspective. And finally, here's just a shot of the unit mounted on the dash on the non-slip pad. Obviously, if you wanted to do a real subtle installation, you could have that inside your glove box or anywhere in the car, out of sight. Alright, now it's time for a quick run through of the camera menus. So we'll start here. We have our formatting option, so you can format the memory card. Then we have our recording setup, so we have high, middle or low quality. That's your bit rate essentially that it changes, and your recording lengths. The beep settings for the menus, simple on and off. Not a lot of customization in this camera, it's fairly simple, so it's nice if you don't really want to have to change anything. It does pretty much what you want it to out of the box. We have our date and time settings. My only gripe is that hitting that back button can be a bit tricky sometimes, especially if you've got fat thumbs like myself. Our G-sensor settings, I have it turned off as I usually do. We can reset the camera to its default settings here. Our language options. And finally our firmware option. Nice and simple there. Back to the main menu. Now it's showing this please connect sensor because I don't have the camera or the memory card in there, but if I did, that's where you'd be able to review the footage. We have our microphone mute on and off. That button there is for our event recording, as well as that one on the top will also trigger the event recording. Now it's time to take a look at some actual footage from this camera, but I'll remind you as always that YouTube can negatively affect the video quality. We'll start off with some early morning footage. Got the sun sort of shining nice and bright directly into the camera lens there. Gives you a good idea of how this camera reacts to very bright lighting. And as you can see, it adjusts very nicely there, getting a full range of colour. And the addition of having this external lens means you don't have a windscreen to essentially block up the view and ruin the quality with a dirty windscreen. That being said, a windscreen's generally a lot easier to clean than a lens, especially when you're driving along the highway. Now in a moment I'll move on to the next clip, which is driving through the main street of Cronulla as I generally do through my videos. Gives you a good example of the level of detail from these cameras. And here we are, just about to enter the main street through Cronulla. And as you can see, the level of detail with this camera is just, it's very impressive, along with the rest of the Street Guardian range really. They all run at least a 15 megabit bit rate, which means you pick up a lot of detail. You can generally read all the signage along the side of the street. They are very, very clear cameras. Now in a moment I'll move on to some dark and nighttime dusk footage, just so you get an idea of what this camera's like in low light situations. Now as you can see, it's about 8:30 at night in this clip. There's only a tiny bit of light left in the sky. It's coming over quite dark, but the camera still does a very nice job of distinguishing the features through the footage. However, this clip's still fairly well lit, so I'll move on to a couple darker examples for you. And while I'm at it, I'm going to turn over to the in-camera microphone just so you get an idea of what that's like. Here we are, just cruising along at 60k an hour with the windows down. That's to be expected from the Street Guardian cameras. The microphones are just top notch on these, they're very clear. You should be able to hear me very fine, even though there's a wind coming through the car. Very clear audio from what I've already heard from this camera. Here's a good example of nighttime footage for you. Just driving through a state forest at 9 o'clock at night, as you do. Feels like a scene out of Wolf Creek. But it should give you a pretty good indication of what this camera's like at night at least. At the moment I'm just running my standard car headlights on standard beam. Right now I'll turn on a couple of my additional lights and give you a good example of how the camera reacts to it. Now, as I'm sure you'll agree, very respectable audio and video there from the Street Guardian. Now, the regular unit itself with the internal camera retails at $350. Now, the external camera that I've been using for this review is an optional extra at $100, and I'm sure for most people, if you're planning on installing this in a car, you're probably not going to have any need for the external camera. I think it's probably more directed to applications such as me with a bit of four-wheel driving where it can get you a bit more interesting footage, or for motorbike riders who want to avoid the whole legislative mess with helmet cameras. It's something that could be permanently mounted on a bike and just mount the actual unit itself in one of the storage containers on a bike. But if you're just after a nice subtle unit for a car that has parking mode and high quality video, this is definitely a very high up contender. Now, for those that are interested in this camera, I'll place a link down in the description to the camera, as well as the optional external waterproof lens, just so you can take a look at them. Now, I'll cover some of my likes and dislikes for this particular model. I really like the small form factor. It really is a subtle, very small camera. So if you're after something like that, it does an excellent job keeping out of sight. Very good video quality footage from a high bit rate. Plus, you can always expand the memory up to 128GB if you want and get hours and hours of footage. The things I'm not particularly keen on with this camera is the additional cost for the external camera. I would have been happier if you could order the standalone normal lens as one kit or the external lens as another kit at the same price. I think that would be a better way to market it, but that's just me personally. And the navigation on the menus can be a little bit tricky hitting that reverse button, but apart from that, I really can't fault this camera on anything else. Now, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to know about this camera, post down in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to everyone when they ask. So, thank you for watching this review. This is Troy from Dashcam Owners Australia. Have a good day.